So as I mentioned, Alabama is done with the gauntlet of the non-conference slate. For reference, and we'll reference Ken Palm in a little bit because I know that a couple of people have asked me to do it. But Alabama's Ken Palm, rankings of the teams they've played this season. UNC Asheville's so far in last at like 189th in the country. Arkansas State's at 112, and they're the only two teams currently that Alabama has played outside of the top 100, right? Alabama wins both of those games fairly comfortably. Arkansas State played us well, but I think that has more to do with the coach on the sideline than it has to do with the team. I think Arkansas State's a really good team, but I do think that's because Brian Hodgson coached with Nate Oates for many years and knows how to play that style of team. Then you have McNeese State. That's Will Wade. Will Wade is as good a coach as possible. I think he slowed that game down and just kept the margin of victory that he wanted to kind of lose by, so to speak. Then Alabama, plays number 21 Purdue, 16 Illinois, 4 Houston, 76 Rutgers, 17 Oregon, 28 North Carolina, and 42 Creighton. Right, so the majority of the rest of the teams that Alabama has played have been top 75. The reason I bring these up is the next three games Alabama is going to face before they get into conference slate are the worst three teams they will have faced to this point. All three teams are outside of the top 100. And this next team in North Dakota is outside of the top 290. They're 295 currently in Ken Palm, right? Now, the question for some people is going to be, why are we playing North Dakota? And especially, why are we playing North Dakota at North Dakota, right? Seems kind of crazy. The answer is very simple. We did it for Grant Nelson, right? So if you look at this game and you say, why is Alabama playing North Dakota at North Dakota? We did it for Grant Nelson, right? The reason we played Creighton with the home and home is we wanted to be able to play in Omaha for Latrell Reitzel. If you look back to when we played in Canada, we did it for Charles Bediako. Funny enough, he wasn't there when we played the game. The plan was that he would be. But all these games get scheduled so that guys can kind of go back to their hometown, especially if it works out, right? Obviously, we're not going to do it if it's not possible, right? But if Nate Oates and the opposing coach can figure out something that makes sense for both teams, then it makes sense for us to schedule a home and home or a 2-for-1 or whatever so that we can go play near one of our players' hometown and them be able to have their family there and, just kind of have a homecoming of sorts. And that's the reason why we're playing North Dakota, right? This is the worst team that we will play this season, right? It's also a good thing because we can work on some lineups. We can get Chris Youngblood and Houston Millette kind of into the flow of the offense a little more against not nearly as good of a defense as what they faced the last couple of weeks, right? It really is just what we need for the team, right? We can test out lineups. We can do what we need to do before you get into what is going to be an incredible SEC slate, right? For those of you that are unaware, the SEC is far and away the best conference in college basketball right now. Last I saw, they were 143-20 in the non-conference right now. There's not a single team in the SEC with a losing record currently. I think South Carolina is the worst, quote-unquote, worst team in conference with 3 losses, and it's 7-3, right? This is an elite basketball conference, and I do expect that, it will be a battle every game out on the floor, right? When we're talking about the Ken Palm numbers, currently the worst ranked team in the SEC per Ken Palm is 68th, right? Take this with a grain of salt. It's still December. Ken Palm numbers are not the end of the world, but this just gives you a reference as to what we're looking at for the rest of the season, right? I do expect these numbers to change. I do expect they're probably to be an SEC team, get higher than that as the season goes along, but that's where the numbers sit today as of December the 15th, right? Is that the worst SEC team currently ranked is 68th. And that's just insane. So, what do I want to see as it comes through these next 3 games? And as I said, we're going to break down a little bit of North Dakota. We'll talk about the game a little bit, but I don't want to have this be a breakdown of just the North Dakota game. I think this should be an idea as to what we need to know, what I want to see for North Dakota, Kent State, and South Dakota State, right? Because I think in general, all 3 of these games, I personally want to see kind of the same thing, right? I want to see Nate Oates figure out some rotations because now you have your full lineup, right? Anyone who is going to be eligible to play this season is now, able to play, right? Not to say Chris Youngblood may not be on a little bit of a minutes restriction with some of these games. He still may be. But, especially for that South Dakota State game, you got a week off in between Kent State and South Dakota State. So I think because of how these games are spread out, I do think that we're going to have some time to get some guys some rest. And that, by that South Dakota State game, we're going to have a pretty good idea, and especially before Oklahoma, again, having another week in between, we're going to have a pretty good idea as to what our lineups need to be and the health of our lineups, right? Because I think that in general, our guys are pretty healthy right now. Obviously, with the exception of Latrell, is going to be out for the season. But I think our guys are healthy, and that is going to have, Nate Oates with the ability to decide, hey, this is in this type of game with this style of play. I need to play Mo D, X number of minutes, and Aiden Sherrill X number of minutes, if they're playing well, right? Or maybe in this kind of game, we want to have Houston Millette play more because you need an extra three-point shooter, and you're not looking for as much of a big body like an Aiden Sherrill, or a Mo Diabate, a more physical guy, right? So it's really, that's what I'm looking for as it comes to those games, right? I want to see Nate Oates determining what lineups make more sense. So far this season, he's really been using a huge percentage of his lineup, right? In this last game, every scholarship player that's eligible to play and is not injured, so everybody not named Latrell is playing this season, right? So he had 11 guys. I think that rotation is not, realistic. I think that most games you're going to want to see like 8 to 9 guys, maybe 10, in a specific instance, like if somebody fouls out or you need somebody for like a very short instance, right? I think that we need to shrink the lineup just slightly, right? And it needs to be on a per game basis, right? It seems like we did that a little bit in this Creighton game because Mo Diabate, only played 4 minutes. Houston Millette only played 8 minutes, right? But this is a game where I think that just in general, I think that the flow of Nate Oates' system works better when people have a little bit more time, right? If they can't really get into the speed and pace at which we play, I think that I understand the fresh bodies element, right? We're getting fresh bodies out there so that we're able to keep the pace up the whole time. But I do think there is kind of a mix and match of, yes, you're getting fresh bodies out there, but you're also losing the ability for them to get into the flow of the offense, right? Or the flow of the defense, quite frankly, right? So that's something that I would like to see with these next few games is if we can potentially like shrink the roster just slightly. And again, I'm not expecting this to mean like, hey, one guy gets completely pushed out of the roster. But for example, if we're going to look at two guys, you could look at like a Mo D and a Houston Millette, right? I think their skill sets are completely different, and I think that the type of game in which they can be successful is completely different, right? I think that if you're looking at a game like a Houston, right, obviously a really big game for a guy like Mo D, right? That is the perfect style game for him. Then if you look at the game like North Carolina, right, the first game that we have Houston Millette play, that's a really good game for Houston because it was a very fast-paced game, a very in-the-flow game. There's some rhythm threes to be gotten, right, in transition. That's two perfect styles for the way these two guys play. One plays much more in the flow, one plays more gritty and physical. And so I think that's, those are two guys that it would not surprise me if their roles boosted in the games in which they're going to be super helpful and shrunk in the games in which they're not, right? Just so that we can make sure that the lineups kind of flow and make sense together, right? Especially as you're getting a guy like Chris Youngblood that, from what I can tell, is going to be very successful. I think that what he does and what Alabama needs, he's going to be able to bring to us, right? So that is something I would like to see for these next few games is Alabama just being able to look at what's going to be successful and, build the lineups as it relates to that. Also, be able to get guys rest, right? Mark Sears played over 30 minutes in this game, and it was great that he did, right? But I don't think that in these next 3 games, we need to be playing guys over 30, right? If it's 30, 31, 32 maybe, I'm okay with that, right? But I think that needs to be the hard cap for most of these games because I think that working on the lineups and getting guys rest as it goes and not just pushing the lineups like you had to do last season, right? Because when Latrell got injured last season, you had guys like Aaron Estrada and Mark Sears playing 40 minutes, right? Obviously, we have more guards this year, so we're not going to have to do that. But I just think that when we had fresh legs last season, you saw a lot better Alabama team just due to the speed in which we play. So again, I would like to see us, even on the top end, right, shrink the minutes, make sure nobody's going more than like 31, ideally no more than 30, right, but no more than 31, 32 minutes max. And then also on the bottom end, let's see, in some games, let's make sure that everybody, in this North Dakota game, I would expect that most people get some minutes, right, as he plays around with rosters, because I think you're going to be able to. But then in the next two games, again, let's see what's successful. Let's see what works. Let's get Chris into the flow of the offense. Let's get Houston into the flow of the offense. And let's see what Alabama can do as they get ready for a gauntlet of an SEC stretch, right? So that's the last thing I wanted to talk about. Like I said, I know it's not an exact breakdown as it comes to North Dakota. I didn't want to, bore you guys with breaking down a team that currently sits at 4-7 and has the 331st ranked defense in the country. Spoiler alert, I think Alabama's going to win and probably win comfortably, even though it's at North Dakota, right? I do think that Alabama's going to have a lot of success in this game. I think Alabama's just got athletes that are just better than anybody North Dakota is going to be able to throw at them. So I do think that Alabama is going to be successful in this game, and that's no surprise. So, I just didn't think it made sense for me to break down this specific game just due to what I think is going to happen. So I will do a bit of a breakdown, as I said, next week after this game so that I can make sure everybody's aware, like, hey, this is what I look forward for the next two games. And then, like I said, the schedule may shake up just a little bit because I will be out of town and I'm not sure how the recording setup is going to be able to go. If you do follow me over on Twitter, I will be putting out threads for all of the games. I'm going to try to type those up as I have some time so that I just have those ready to put out whenever the game comes up. I can put those threads out on the Twitter feed that morning of the game, right? So just follow me over on Twitter if you don't already. I will give breakdowns of like what players to watch for opposing teams, who we need to watch for the Alabama team, what my prediction is, whether it be the glass or where I think either team is going to be successful, and then my prediction, right? So follow me over on Twitter for those. Those are going to come out as they always do. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching the podcast and subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.